Hey guys, this is Justine from the present, here to let you know we just found out some exciting news. Pod Appétit was just nominated for an award. We are so thrilled to be finalists in the Best Food-Focused Podcast category of the 2020 Discover Pods Awards. It's crazy. I can't believe this is happening. What? What is reality? So, we would really appreciate it if you could vote for us. Please go to awards.discoverpods.com, find the awards section, and we're at the bottom of the list with food-focused podcasts. Voting ends November 6th. I'm speaking for all of us when I say we are deeply flattered by just being nominated at all. We didn't know this was happening, so it's up to you guys. You did this, so thank you so much. Now, on with the show.
We're four friends with hot takes on food media.
And we're here to review and recap all kinds of food shows in bite-sized seasons.
Plus, virtual potlucks, cooking adventures, and food memes.
Welcome to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hey, it's Justine.
Hi, it's LJ.
And it's me, Meg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another amazing episode of Pod Appétit.
Oh, man.
Amazing.
Words. I'll do that again. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another awesome episode of Pod Appétit. We are very happy to have you. On the menu for today's episode, we are talking all about episode 4 of Samin Nosrat's Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat series, and it is all things heat. Fuego. Back home in California, in this episode, Samin uses heat to unlock rich colours and flavours as she roasts meat and veggies, then makes crispy rice with her mum. So I'm looking forward to talking about that, but first, let's talk about what we've been cooking up this week. Justine, I'm going to go to you. What have you been making?
Oh, yeah. I've got a couple things that, you guys already know about and I've shared that I would love to share with the audience now. So, as you know, I've been really getting into the fall mood, even though it's been 90 degrees consistently in LA. I've made a roasted butternut squash soup. Sorry, Amanda.
It's fine. As long as I don't have to eat it, it's fine.
I want to eat it. I love butternut squash soup. I'm so jealous.
But the other thing that I made that maybe Amanda would enjoy is the pumpkin pie smoothie bowl.
That looked delicious.
Nom, 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 nom.
Isn't that basically just like a dessert soup? Question mark.
And you can put whipped cream on it.
Exactly. So, Amanda, if you like dessert soup, you might like savoury soup one day. I'm determined to get a gateway into soup for Amanda.
If it's cheese-based soup, I have had that. Oh, have I not mentioned that
interesting.
before?
We've got it in.
Like fondue.
How do you feel about slightly melted milkshakes? Is that too soupy for you?
Actually, yes, I've had that experience this week where the milkshake I had put in the freezer, I took out to unfreeze a little bit, and then I forgot, and then I was like, oh, this is too much, and put it back in the freezer.
Oh, no.
So no dessert soup either, I guess.
Oh, I thought we had one. Never mind. Anyway, you made a pumpkin smoothie bowl, Justine, and it looked delicious.
Yeah, super easy. It's just like a
Super easy.
Yeah.
soup. Oh, thanks. Yes. Can of coconut milk, dates, pumpkin puree, cinnamon, vanilla extract, ginger, nutmeg, maple syrup, ice cubes, all in a blender.
Oh.
And then top with all your favorite crunchy bits and whipped cream, like I said. And it literally is like liquid pumpkin pie to your face.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I've also made soup. Maybe I should go next because I'm on the same theme. I made mushroom soup, which is one of my favorites, and I love making it when it's like gets cold out after the summer and it starts getting all the leaves start turning. That's when I'm like, yeah, mushroom soup. So yeah, I made some of that. It was really easy. I think it was I don't think you guys have these chefs in the US, but there's a chef duo in the UK called the Hairy Bikers. Do you know who they are?
No.
They're on the BBC. They have a show. They have cookbooks. They're two like men who ride motorcycles and cook. So yeah, they have a recipe on the BBC website for really easy like mushroom soup, and it was just cook up some mushrooms, blend it with some stock and some cream and stuff, and it was delicious. So I have lots of that in the freezer. Meg, have you been making anything super interesting?
I made something soup adjacent. I made vegetable stew.
Nice.
So I'm definitely in the autumn mood as well, nice and hearty. It was really good. It was potatoes, carrots, celery, mushrooms, and to make the base used flour, red wine. There's something else in there. Oh, soy sauce and tomato paste. And just let it all sort of simmer together for about an hour. Super good. And it made about 6 meals worth.
Wow.
So it was definitely worth it.
I love recipes like that where you can just like save some, freeze it or whatever, and then you don't have to think for a bit.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Amanda, what did you do?
I've made nothing once again. It's not been a great time. Well, as you guys also know, I'm trying to find an apartment, so a lot of my evenings are spent like trolling, not trolling, I guess. I'm not making fun of anyone.
Trolling.
Like
just trolling people who have apartments.
Trolling
man.
landlords.
You suck. You got an apartment. That's my troll voice. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that when I'm not at work. But I did want to shout out, I know technically it's a corporate run place, but this morning I had to drive my sister Addie, and I stopped at the Olentangy River Road across from Lennox Starbucks. And I was the second car in line at the window when I realized I had forgotten my wallet at home. And so I pulled up and I was like, I'm sorry, you can keep it. It just slipped my mind because like my sister woke up late and I was just like trying to get out of the house. And he was like, you know what? We do good things for good people. And he gave me my chai for free, which was very sweet of him. And I didn't expect it. So.
And then he called the cops on you for driving without a license.
No, thank God he did not. But I thought it was very sweet of him. And he was like, it's a Sunday. You enjoy your chai. And I was just like, I love this man.
Oh, that's nice. I like when people do
nice.
that. No, let's talk about Samin's final episode in Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which is Heat. So Samin is at home for this one. It's the only episode in the series that isn't really a travelogue as such. I don't know. That was the first thing I noticed. I don't know how you guys felt about that.
This episode kind of felt like a completely different show.
I agree. This episode felt very different. I still really enjoyed this episode, but maybe not as much as the others. And I think it is because we don't get the beautiful scenery of another country, which was a big plus in the other episodes for me. And I think I mentioned this before. I really like the dynamic when Samin is the student, when she's learning and she's asking questions and she's being curious. And for most of this episode, she was the instructor, which, you know, she's very knowledgeable. There's a lot to learn from her. But I just kind of enjoyed the premise of her exploring and learning in the other episodes.
She's just such a delight. Like, her curiosity is so delightful to watch. Do you know what I mean? And there was just less of that because she was in that instructor mode. And I agree. I really missed the travelogue aspect. Like, I was kind of disappointed that they were like, oh, let's do it back home. And I know that she's worked at Chez Panisse. I know they've got an open flame fire grill thing there. So I guess if you're doing Heat, that seems like a good option. But I just felt like it would have felt like more of a set of 4 episodes if they'd just picked kind of different places to showcase each of the, you know, the variables that they're talking about, rather than just being like, oh, I'll just do it at the restaurant down the road.
Yeah, I agree with all of this. It kind of felt to me like, because one of the things we've discussed is how so far all of the other episodes really feels like it hasn't necessarily built upon the other yet. And I know that's something like in the last episode that we talked about, like hopefully it does that. But I almost feel like instead there should have been a 5th episode. And like this was heat, and it was another place that she went and focused on heat for everything. And then a 5th episode that brought all 4 elements together. Because I kind of felt like not just the travelogue portion that we've all enjoyed had short shrift, but I felt like heat in general had short shrift in this episode. In the way that we really got to explore all the different, I mean, you know, we even had a whole section with acid that's like, what was the thing that was most surprising to you that was an acid, you know, and the different kinds of fat and the different kinds of salt. And it felt like instead we basically just had, there's fire heat and then there's a stove heat, and we didn't get a lot of different ways that heat can be used. And I don't know, it just felt like we needed more of an exploration of heat throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, because when they were making the rice dish, she said, here's 2 different kinds of heat, which is one reason why we're doing this dish. We've got the steaming and then we have the frying. And I feel like even like a rundown, just a bulleted list of all the different ways to cook things could have been interesting, you know, like roast, fry, poach, boil.
You're talking about what a meal used to do, like every different way to cook.
Almost every way to make rice, yeah.
No, but I do know what you mean. They did focus on a couple of different ways to use heat, but we didn't get like an exhaustive, or not even exhaustive, because I don't think they did that in the other episodes, but like a broader exploration of what that element does and can do for a dish.
What do you think, like, if she had went to like a local barbecue pit or something?
That would have been great.
Because she talked about the fat in the meat with the butcher and the different ways to cook it, but we didn't see it. I don't know, like, because the way he was describing the brisket, the 4 of us have seen that done in other television shows, but it felt like that would have been more of a cohesive thing to show us the heat and how it affected those elements.
So I hadn't watched this show before watching it for the podcast. So in the beginning, in the salt and fat episodes, I wasn't 100% sure whether heat meant temperature or spice.
Yes.
I did think, this probably means temperature just because of the imagery they were using, the flame and the charred vegetables and things like that. But I kind of wondered up until the last episode, are they going to explore spice heat as an element? So I guess that's not one of her 4 basic elements in the cookbook, but it could have been interesting maybe. I don't know. It feels like an important element of cooking to me.
I agree with you. I was all the way through, I had kind of assumed that heat, because I feel like spice is a huge part of cooking, right? Like you want to, maybe you don't need it for every dish, and that's why she didn't use it, but I don't know. I like you thought maybe it could be both, like the actual cooking process and like what type of heat, flame heat you're using, but also, you know, how you can bring warmth, I guess that warm kind of heat in your mouth from spice as well. But yeah, clearly that wasn't where she was going with it. But yeah, I did wonder the same.
Yeah, I thought the same, but then I also like the sort of, in the beginning, the exploration of like the physical changes of food and those textures that you get from heat. Like one of my favorite things that mentioned right at the top is crispy potatoes, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah.
Samin starts off by going to Chez Panisse, which is the restaurant that she used to work at in California. I've read a lot about Chez Panisse. It's quite well known, I would say, if you're into food. My friends got the cookbook from Chez Panisse, and they're quite well known for having their big open fire cooking set up there. So I guess I kind of buy why she'd want to, you know, at least feature that in some way in an episode all about heat, because obviously she spent a lot of time, I guess, around that fire cooking. So we got to spend some time with the head chef there, Amy Densler, grilling some steaks.
It's an interesting place, and I don't know if it was in this episode or I don't know if you guys listened to the podcast that came after this. Maybe I jumped
did
ahead.
not.
I didn't.
But she does talk about how, like, she learned there and there's nothing written down and they change every day and it's like nothing is measured and it's all about using your senses, which is where she discovered the theory that she put together of like, oh, all of these things that like all these chefs are putting together have all these 4 elements.
I think I quite liked the little montage when she was explaining some of that in this episode, where you saw the chefs, you know, feeling stuff with their hands and like tasting stuff, like tasting the coriander, taste it, or the herbs or whatever. And it was just like, it looked like a sensory experience working there in a way that sometimes other kitchens in other places are a bit more clinical. And I think personally, that's like the way I like to cook. I like to taste. I like to, you know, I like to go, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like nothing's ever exactly the same or replicable every time. It's always slightly different depending on what you have on hand, depending on, you know, how you're feeling that day. And I quite liked that approach to cooking. So I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, she really underscored the sensory experience a couple of times in this episode. Taste, smell, touch, aroma. I said smell already. I'm just repeating myself now. You get the point.
Thesaurus.
Yeah, exactly. She had mentioned this in previous episodes of salt, fat, acid, heat, but I do think she made a point to mention it again in this episode. And that's a good point you make, LJ. So much of cooking is just going by instinct. I mean, you can follow a recipe to the T, but you still want to possibly make adjustments, right? That's really is what comes with experience with cooking, is being able to trust your senses and know from past experience that it could use a little bit more salt or it could use 5 more minutes in the oven, because everyone has different variables in their own kitchens, what they're working with, the ingredients they have. So it's really reliant on senses more than following a recipe.
Right. And as to what you guys were saying, I feel like this episode was not about heat, but it's more of the summation of Samin as a teacher being like, this is the basics you need in order to be a cook, a home cook. She's like, here are the basics. And that's what she's like all about. Like, I was even listening to her podcast last night, the latest one with Jason Manzuka, who cannot cook at all.
That was a great
episode. And again, she was going over like, just roast vegetables, just, you know, just basic. This is what I eat every day. Don't put all your vegetables in one pan, like all this stuff that she's like still to this day being like, here are the basics.
Yeah.
I have such a crush on Jason Mantzoukas, so I'll have to check this out.
Yes. You'll love it.
I loved watching them make those steaks on the fire.
Yes.
We've heard a lot about the heat zones over a flame from the show that shall not be named. So that wasn't new to me necessarily, but it was nice to hear Samin talk about it. And I was also delighted when she said about the crosshatches on a grilled steak and how that's basically bullshit. Like you should want like a lovely browned steak. And I was so glad to have that verified, because I'm like, the best bit is where it goes crispy and brown. Like, why wouldn't you want that over the whole thing? Like, that's important. So yeah, I thought it was just such a nice sequence, seeing them kind of feel those steaks, make sure that it's right, you know, for amount of doneness that they were looking for, use those coals like effectively to get the right amount of heat for the different bits of the cooking. And yeah, it just looked delicious, that meal at the end that they served up with the vegetables and the potatoes at the end as well with the steak. It just looked delightful, so I was really into that.
I definitely enjoyed this segment for the food porn aspect of it. It looks so delicious.
Then of course she went to the supermarket and we got crash course on how to shop for meat.
So I don't want to jump the gun, but I do feel like, and we've sort of talked about this already, this episode does sum up the elements of salt, fat, acid, heat. So when we have the shopping for meat, this is just another way of shopping for fat, and they talk about the fat in the meat, and that's what you want to look for. And then the other 2 segments that come later, shopping for produce and shopping for salt, she talks about acid and citrus in the produce segment, and then obviously shopping for salt is all about salt. So They really did make an effort to show how all these elements come together. And I enjoyed the shopping tips, although we had kind of gotten some of these tips already earlier in the season.
I agree with you. I did like the shopping tips, although the bit that I guess was a little bit irritating was when she was having that conversation with the butcher, and she was basically asking all the stupid questions, right, to get the guy to be like, this is how you do it and this is how you know what to look for. And I was just like, but we know that Samin knows this, so why is she now like, can't she just have a conversation with him rather than being like, I don't know what I'm doing, can you because like we know that's not true. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it just felt like a really odd way to frame that conversation, given we've just spent like 3 hours with her seeing her learn all of this stuff, and then to come back to the guy in the store and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, essentially, when it was like, that's not
it's
right.
It's a weird counter to when, remember, she had that giant pig and she was like, this is this section and this is this, and this, like, she can look at a whole pig and be like, I know everything about this.
So that bit felt like an odd dynamic, given what we know about Samin and given the 3 episodes we've seen thus far and the amount that the audience has learned if they've been following along. Like, I get she wanted to, like, I guess, underscore the key lessons, but I just felt like they could have had that conversation in a different way.
Yeah, Amanda, what do you think as your novice aspect?
I mean, the novice aspect, yeah, it's good to hear that. Some of those things are things that we've covered previously on this podcast in its previous form. But in the production side of it, it felt more staged, like from a viewer standpoint. And I think maybe that is something that felt more off about this episode as well, is it felt more staged in general and not as natural. I do think from that novice standpoint, like, all those different lessons are good. And there were a few things that I was like, oh, that's something I'm going to take away from this. Like, when, I know it's, the next one, but when she did the produce shopping and she talked about putting the herbs, trimming the edges, and then putting it into water in the fridge to make them last longer. I thought, oh, okay, that's a tip I will take away from this. Like, usually when I use herbs, it's normally more around like Thanksgiving time as of right now. So, and that's coming up. I don't want to think about it quite yet, but that is coming up, and I have to start thinking about it. So, like, that was something that I was like, oh, okay, good tip. Like, Meg mentioned the citrus, and when she said, like, the way you squeeze it, you can tell if there's juice in there. And I do have a tendency to use more citrus with things, so I thought, oh, okay, that's a good tip. There were little things like that were helpful. Yes, I am a novice and I'm trying to learn from these things, but I'm also watching for an entertainment value. And in that side of it, all of it felt more staged. Especially one thing that I wanted to bring up in this episode overall is it felt like it started to become more and more of an advertisement for the book, because we started getting more of an incorporation throughout the episode of the illustrations from the woman who illustrated the book. So even like when it was like the illustrations of the Morton salt versus the diamond salt, it was like, I don't know, everything to me started feeling more like an advertisement by the end.
I wish the illustrations were present throughout the series.
Yes.
Yeah, I liked her illustrating, because that happens in a little bit, doesn't it? We basically start intercutting between Samin making some dishes for the family style meal at the end, with this kind of tip section of how to shop for various things. And and on one of those, she has her illustrator come. But I really like the illustrations, and it is a shame. I don't know why they just waited until this episode to use them. Like, that seems silly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad that it's advertising for her book. It's another thing in this episode that felt stylistically different from the first 3 episodes.
So the first dish we see Samin making, and the first, I guess, heat element that she really does a deep dive on showcasing is roasting buttermilk chicken.
Yeah, this buttermilk chicken, like, I've seen so many people do on Instagram. It's such a popular recipe of hers.
Yeah. Well, she says it, doesn't she? She says it sums up, that one dish sums up all of the lessons that she wants people to take away from this series. So, you know, you've got the buttermilk for the fat and also acid. You've got, you know, the roasting to get the bird, you know, nice and brown and crispy and then moist, but then you use the salt to kind of draw the moisture out. Yeah, I think it's a good standard. Everybody should know how to roast a good chicken, unless you don't eat meat, obviously, Justine.
This is something, as I was watching, I kept wondering, because I know, LJ, you have shared the wonders of roast chicken in the past. Is this a roast chicken recipe you want to try?
I have made a buttermilk chicken before. I don't actually like doing it that much because it's, for some reason in the UK, it's really hard to get buttermilk. They don't just sell it in every supermarket. Like the local one that does delivery used to do it, but only in like small packages, like small cartons, and so you'd need like loads to, I mean, I know you can make buttermilk yourself, which is one way of getting around it, but I just can't be bothered most of the time. And also my like standard go-to roast chicken recipe makes a really good roast chicken, so I'm like, why would I go to the trouble? But yeah, I would just cover it with olive oil and salt and put some lemon and onion and stuff inside and roast it. But yeah, I've made a buttermilk chicken before. I like it. Don't get me wrong. It's not my go-to when it comes to chicken.
I was thinking, I'd really like to make this for our potluck episode, but I'm still not eating meat to this day, so I probably won't be eating meat a couple of weeks from now. But I went to the Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat website for the other recipes in this episode because the salad and the tahdig rice dish both looked amazing.
Yeah.
But they also don't have the recipes for those on the website. Both say coming soon. And I'm like, come on, this show came out 2 years ago. Are we ever going to get these recipes?
They basically were like, oh, we forgot about that. Sorry.
It's like the mid-90s, like, website under construction gif.
I know, what a shame. But yeah, the chicken one is on there.
I like her advice of ovens are imprecise, and I like that like illustration, and I keep going, I'm like, I gotta get an in-oven thermometer. I'm like, I gotta do that, because even my oven is like hella old, and I've gotten, used to like what things should look like because of it. And I think definitely a good investment.
I did like that illustration and her explanation of the back of the oven is always going to be hotter because every time you open it, the heat comes out the front. And it's such a basic concept, but I'd never thought of it in that way before. So that was one thing. Another thing like I used as a takeaway from this episode as more of a novice of like, oh, that is definitely something I will think about next time I'm putting something in the oven, is automatically that back is going to be a lot hotter.
Yeah, that's why turning as well is really important when you cook something, because if you just, keep something in there the same the whole time, the oven it's not the same temperature evenly, most ovens anyway, so you turning it makes sure that you get the evenness. But yeah, I thought that explanation of ovens was really, I think even a lot of experienced home cooks don't think about ovens in that way sometimes. They just think, oh, I've put it to that temperature, that means it's at that temperature, and it's like, no, that's not how ovens work. But just having that in mind, and just, I think that comes back to what you were saying, using your senses. You don't even necessarily need a thermometer, although it does help to be more precise with stuff, because you can just use your senses, right? If it's in there and it's not done, or it's browning unevenly, then you know what to do. You can like turn it around. You can, maybe whack it up a little bit or leave it in there a bit longer, whatever it is, to get to the amount of doneness that you're testing with your senses as you cook it. So you should never just put something in the oven for the amount of time a recipe says and be like, well, it's done now, because that's that's not how everyone's oven's different.
I think all of this also helped me pinpoint one of the reasons I don't like cooking, or I struggle with cooking and prefer baking. There's improvisation, and I fucking suck at improvisation. It causes me extreme anxiety. It has ever since I was like in jazz band in high school. I want to have it mapped out for me, and I want to be able to follow it exactly. And maybe a little make tweaks here and there, but not like full on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I hate to break this to you, Amanda, but you're improvising right now. That's what podcasting is.
But I would also say with baking, there's an element of that too, right? You know, you can't just you can't just follow a recipe for a cake and be like, okay, I'll put it in the oven. It says 40 minutes and bring it out and be like, well, it's done, because it might not be done. Like you have to test for, is it cooked all the way through? Is it burnt on top? Do you know what I mean? Like there's indicators that you look for from a sensory experience to know whether your baking is doing well. And it's just the same thing. It's the same thing, just with savory ingredients. So there's nothing to be scared of.
I don't know. That was a realization I had as I was watching this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, this is probably where some of the thing is like, it is very triggering for me.
That's interesting.
So, yeah.
So Samin has taught us all how to use an oven correctly. But coming up, we will be talking about how to roast veggies, how to make delicious tardig, and discuss her family meal. All of this after the break. After roasting a chicken, Samin goes back to the store, or just we cut back to the store, and she's shopping. She's shopping for produce. She's telling us about her citrus and her, little tips. I know we've talked about them, but I did like that she gave those tips, even though some of them weren't necessarily new to me. It's always nice to be reminded of like good practice, right, when buying stuff and choosing your vegetables.
Another tip I enjoyed in this segment was she said she thinks it's important to know how to cook vegetables that you can find all year. And if you know how to cook those everyday vegetables, then you'll always be able to make a great home-cooked meal no matter what time of the year it is.
So true.
I thought that was a good tip. And she mentioned things like broccoli, carrots, spinach.
Yeah, so she comes back and she roasts those veggies, and that's where we get Wendy, the illustrator. So let's talk about those veggie dishes. Meg, you're a fan, as we've heard.
Yeah, and another tip that I liked in regards to the vegetable salad is that earlier she said she chose the chicken as the anchor for the meal. And she said, choose one main element, in this case the chicken, and then build side dishes or flavors around it that complement that. So I thought that was another good tip. I really thought the salad looked excellent. Anything with beans and feta, I just wanted to eat it all.
It was so good.
Yeah, it wasn't like a salad. It was like a pile of roasted vegetables with herbs on top, and like it was pretty too.
I'm watching
very
going,
pretty.
why is she making a hot salad?
Oh no, I liked it. I loved it. This is the sort of salad I can get on board with. When you get like, it's just really well seasoned and like dressed, and just these kind of, I guess, unexpected elements that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Because like with a roast chicken, I would roast vegetables, but I wouldn't necessarily think to like make beans or as well and put feta on it. And it's just like, you can see the way her mind is thinking, which element is gonna bring this out even more.
With the vinaigrette.
Yeah. And
the vinaigrette also tied in acid, because she said it's this nice acidic shallot vinaigrette.
Yeah, with the za'atar as well. I just thought the flavors were super interesting as well, because it was like Middle Eastern, Iranian kind of inspired as well. The different types of heats that she used in this segment, we kind of got a repeat of roasting in a way, but for vegetables. But we also got the boiling of the beans, right? And seeing the evolution of like the tiny unsoaked bean to the soaked bean to then the cooked bean, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger with all of the, I guess, broth that it's soaked up and made it really creamy. So yeah, we kind of, I guess, got a little hint of another way of using heat, which was boiling, but she didn't really dig into that too much like she did with the roasting.
Yeah, I still don't know how to make beans. Like, of how many shows we've watched of people making beans, I'm like, I'm still terrified of beans.
I think you just have to be patient and not overcook it. I guess there is more to it than just being patient.
Like, you're just
Justine's
triggering more
waiting for the
anxiety.
pot to boil.
So much.
So, Amanda, you were saying that the illustrator inclusion wasn't totally successful for you. And I had similar feelings, but for different reasons, because they brought her in to show her illustrations, which I thought was great. But then Samin was telling her kind of how to cook beans and kind of how to cook the Brussels sprouts. And I don't think this was the illustrator's fault, but she just seemed kind of disinterested in the edit. She just kind of like, She didn't really have much to say about the cooking itself and, you know, sitting there doodling vegetables. So it just seems like she's not paying attention.
She had another job to do.
But yeah, she also was like, you've changed my life. And I was like, yeah, it really sounds like it.
But I did really enjoy seeing her illustrations. And yeah, it did feel a little shoehorned in when it's mostly about cooking. But I do love illustrations. So I wouldn't have minded, I don't know, bonus content or something that's like, here's how our illustrator makes illustrations for the books. And shout out to her Sakura Micron pens, because those are like the best pens for doodling in ink. I love those things.
Oh, stationery content. Bonus.
I was like, I know those pens.
So then we cut back to Samin shopping for some salt. So this is, I guess, the final element that she wants to teach us how to shop for in the store. And she makes the point about all the different types of salts that you can get, and each salt is not created equal. Again, this is not new news because it's something that BA emphasized quite a lot throughout their stuff. So it wasn't new to me, but it's good to have that in. I'm sure that's useful to lots of people. And again, I think before I started watching food stuff more avidly, it wasn't something I really thought about. I was just like, salt, surely. Like, every recipe says a teaspoon of salt or a tablespoon of salt. They don't ever specify, but only a certain type of salt. If you're using a different type, then it's this. Like, nobody ever says that.
This reminds me, I was watching something late last night while my boyfriend was going through like the free channels, and there was this cooking show, I will not name it, and I was just aghast at what they were doing. She was like, here, and just use some regular old table salt, and I was like, is it kosher? I'm like, what is it? I'm like, what kind of salt is this? I was like, no, what? I was just like horrified that they were like, and then some salt, and then some basic cheddar. And I'm like, what are you doing? I hate you.
But it is like, there are many cooking shows that I've watched where they specify the wild difference you can get in taste between different types of salt. I feel like it's something that people should be talking about more, because it's going to drastically change how your dish tastes, right?
I totally agree. If you put too much salt, it literally ruins the dish.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's no correcting that. So you do think it would be something that every recipe would emphasize.
It feels like the dirty secret of cooking. Like, nobody's talking about it. And that's why people think that they're terrible cooks, but actually it's just they've just not been told about the salt thing. Then Samin, we get like the final recipe segment. She brings her mom in to make tadig, and I guess that the heat elements that they're trying to showcase is the steaming of the rice and the frying of the rice. And that's why they've chosen that dish for this episode, because it's two different types of heat for one dish. Tadig is just one of those. I don't think I've ever eaten it, but I've seen it made a few times on shows, and it's one of those that I would love to try making, but I feel like I'd just fuck it up. I feel like it's one of those things you do need like an Iranian mum showing you what to do.
I feel the same way, but on the other hand, I also think, well, fucking this up, it would probably still taste pretty good. You would still have a big pot of buttered rice, so I think it would be okay.
True.
You might not get that beautiful crust, but it would still be edible. But you don't want to waste saffron. It's such a
oh my god,
ingredient.
the amount of saffron. And I know they made the point that like people go to Samin's house and they're like, oh my god, that's like $3,000 worth of saffron that you have in your cupboard. But I was like, but seriously though, you've got so much saffron. Like I don't know about you guys, but like a little pot of it for us is like, I don't know, £5, £6, and that's like, I don't know, a third of the amount that she was using for one dish. And I was like, I'm sorry, I just don't have the budget for this amount of saffron. It's not happening. Crazy.
Can we talk about, I don't know if you noticed in the illustration for the tarig, it had the mention of wabi-sabi.
Yes, I did notice that. Yes.
That's something I also learned from Samin, is it's a Japanese sort of phrase and view about how you should accept and live in the imperfections, which is, why she is okay with it falling apart.
Yes, I like that they showed that. It would have been so easy for them to, like, on a quite highly produced show like this, you could easily imagine some other producer or presenter being like, oh no, we'll have to do it again. But I'm so glad they kept that in, because that is life, right? And doesn't mean the food's bad. It doesn't mean that there's a problem. Just some of it fell off the plate, like big whoop, it's still delicious.
She makes this point in using slightly different words, saying, she really wants to tell people how to make a good meal at home, and that you shouldn't necessarily compare home cooking to restaurant cooking, because they are kind of two different creatures. And I think that kind of illustrates, you wouldn't be served that in a restaurant, but at home it's still going to taste delicious, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with a little bit of an imperfection.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think of having your friends cook with you when you invite them over for dinner?
I understand the feeling behind it, the idea behind it, right? But in practice, no, I don't think I would have people help me in the kitchen. But, it's kind of a logistics reason. And also because Samin's an expert, right? And what you were saying, LJ, about that she can impart her knowledge upon everyone. I can't do that. Why should someone listen to me about how to cook something? I'd be like, I don't know, it looks good. And also, logistically speaking, your own kitchen, obviously, better than any guest is going to. And honestly, it's just more work as a host when you're like, oh yeah, the spoons are over there and the salt's there and the plates are there, because you're getting interrupted every minute helping everyone else prepare something.
I think it depends who I've got over. Like, my cookbook club buddies that we have, well, before the pandemic, we were having, every month one of us would cook something. Like, we'd quite often go over and it would be like, can we do anything to help? Because we know each other's kitchens relatively well. And it's like, we all know that we know how to cook, so it's not too much of an issue. So you're not like, oh God, are they doing it right? Do you know what I mean? So like, I've been over and like peeled 40 cloves of garlic for a stew or whatever it is. Like, do you know what I mean? Because that's the job that needed doing. Or I've like rolled out the samosa dough or whatever. And that's quite fun. But I think if it was like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like too many cooks can spoil the broth. Like, if I'm super stressed out and I'm like trying to get everything on the table, the last thing I need is like people in my kitchen going, oh, where's this? Where's that? And I'm like, just get out and let me do it. Do you know what I mean? You have a drink and sit there and relax, and the food will be with you. So I think it just depends.
And on the reverse side, if you go to somebody's house, do you want to be put to work?
Oh, that's a great point. I want to be taken care of and enjoy my evening when I go over to someone's house.
I kept thinking, what if her guests didn't know? And they're like, what do you mean? You want me to cook? Like, you said you were having a dinner party. At no point did I sign a contract that said I would cook for you at your dinner party that you're hosting.
And this is where I imagine Samin going, but I'm imparting knowledge. Like, this is good for you.
Is it learning about cooking just the best thing?
It made me think of like, it would be the same thing if I invited you guys over here and then I was like, oh, I didn't have a chance to like clean the bathroom. Can you go do that? I don't know. Like, that just... It just seems like a very rude thing for a host to expect of guests.
I think this is where it just depends on the audience, right? Like, if it's people you don't know that well or people that you haven't cooked for that much, I think it would be weird to suddenly be like, can you prep those carrots for me? But like, if it's people that you have over all the time, family, like, I'd have no issue saying, can you just peel some potatoes? Like, I think it's the vibe, I guess, of the situation.
But she kept talking about how it was a dinner party and she loves having people over, and she was like even tying up little napkins and stuff. I don't know. It was just like she'd done all this presentational stuff. Then it was like, now get to work, guys. And
I'm just imagining showing up at Samin's doorstep and you're really excited for this dinner party, and then you look around and you see everyone else with their aprons
I mean, clearly,
wait a second.
Yeah, clearly they were close enough friends. And if I went to my brother's and he asked me to help with something, sure, I would help him with something. But like,
Oh yeah, family cooking is definitely
It's
a different
different.
thing altogether. I want my family to help me. I want to help my family, and like you were saying, LJ, it's a matter of familiarity and comfort. It really, I would say, yeah, it depends on the audience. Read the room type of thing.
have put a guest to work before in cooking when I was getting ready for a party, but that's because he showed up 45 minutes early and I was still
Oh no.
finishing stuff. And I was like,
no.
that's
Didn't
the
we talk
worst
about
thing.
this on the show?
Yeah.
That's bad.
yeah. And I was like, well, if you're showing up early, Chris, you get to brown this meat for me. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. There was an element, I understood what Samin was trying to say. Like, it is nice to all be involved in a meal. It is nice to help people understand, how that meal's come together. But there was an element of it where I was just like, all right, like, what if they just came to eat dinner? Like, what are you going to do? Like...
I do think the sentiment tied in nicely with the show because so much of it is about how cooking knowledge is communal and how you learn from other people, and how she was saying in the beginning of this episode, she learns by being around someone's stovetop or chez panisse, just being there and learning. So it did really tie in with the theme of the show. And I did like the parting thought where she said, be thoughtful, be curious, and if you mess something up, you can always try again tomorrow. And I think that that's a great tip to take away, to sort of also take off some of the pressure, because if you think about it, who cares if you burn a chicken or two, right? It'll be disappointing in the moment, but you've learned something. Even if you don't want to wait until tomorrow, you try again at your very next meal, So there's always an opportunity to make something good.
Yeah, and I like that. And I definitely agree with that sentiment for sure. Let's see what is on our other heat back burner. I guess the big news in the culinary world over the past couple of weeks is that Molly Bars and Sola El Whaley have announced that they, on the same day, wasn't it, that they've officially cut ties with Bon Appetit, the magazine, as well as the video element. So Molly is branching out to do her own thing. She's writing a book. So yeah, excited to see what she does next. And I'm really pleased for Sola. Obviously, we know she's going from strength to strength, joining up with Babish and his culinary universe. How do you guys feel about that news? I assume similarly.
Definitely. And Sola also has a new recurring food column and video series with Food 52 as well. I believe that's on a monthly basis. I'm really excited to see what Molly does. I tended to really like her recipes and make them again, so I'll definitely be getting her cookbook.
I'm getting ready for like Christmas and my birthday next year, and I'll just be asking for like cookbooks from all of the people who were formerly of BA and left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they're hoping for.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Everybody who's left are like, here's my cookbook.
Please don't forget about me before it goes on sale.
Yeah, I know.
Rick, Molly, Sola.
Claire.
Yeah. What else have people been watching, I guess, out there in the food universe?
So much. But I'm kind of, I don't know. No, here's the thing. I wrote everything down that I watched, and then I'm just kind of disappointed in myself that it's not a lot of variety. I still think I'm focusing on comfort watches,
Right.
So I've got I watched the basics with Babish. She did that pizza dough. I watched some, Anne Reardon. She came out with a couple videos on debunking viral videos and cake rescuing. Of course, Great British Bake Off. Mm-hmm. The basic, I've thrown in a couple Rosanna Pansino because she's doing some fun Halloween type bakes, and I'm in that mood, as I mentioned. But I don't know. I feel like writing it out, looking at it, I'm like, I want something different, something more variety to that.
Well, if anyone has any recommendations out there, please let us know. We're always on the lookout for new shows to watch, interesting shows that people watch that we may not be aware of.
Yeah, I also don't think it's bad to still be doing comfort watches at this point. I mean, I know we're trying to, for the show, expand out more, but it's still, the world is a little fucking insane right now. So
there is something to be said for that. Yes, that's why I like Great British Bake Off, because it's like a little comfort blanket. It's like a little bit of normality in my life, you know?
Until they insult Babka, but I won't go into that here.
Until they can't make a brownie to save their lives.
I know.
Oh my god,
that was horrendous.
that's next season. Oh, Jesus.
Well, that's on my list. I'm not into the current season, but I did finish UK Series 8, US Season 6 of Great British Bake Off last night. Sophie and Liam, they're the two that have gone on to have careers afterwards.
Oh, Liam. I love Liam. He presents some food shows. I don't think any of them are in current production. But yeah, I've seen him in loads of stuff.
What did you think of that season, Amanda?
I liked it. My sister Addie and I were talking about it this morning when I was driving her to work. She was basically like the same as LJ. Oh my god, I love Liam. And I was like, he's my third favorite Liam in this world. Because I have a nephew Liam and a very good friend Liam.
Hemsworth.
So he can't trump them. It was largely just like kind of a comfort thing, and like it wasn't even like a second screen watching, like, you know, I wasn't like playing around on my phone. I just like put my phone down and just absorbed all of the stuff. And I think one of the things I liked the most at the end of the finale is they kind of showed how the different bakers had become friends and were like going on holiday together and visiting each other. Mm-hmm. And it just made me think of like the way that food can bring people together in different ways, and like how we all came together to make this podcast, and it just like made all those warm, fuzzy, comforting feelings, and I just enjoyed that.
Aww. Yeah, it's nice.
I've been listening to food stuff, so I have been listening to Samin's podcast a little bit, but I think we'll talk about that some more next episode, so I'll wait on that. I've also been listening to a podcast called Off Menu with Ed Gamble and James Acaster.
Yes! I love Off Menu. I listen to that every week. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to assume that just because they were British you would have heard of them, but I was curious to know.
Yeah, Ed Gamble and James Acaster are really well-known comedians in the UK, so yeah, it's brilliant. But yeah, it's a great podcast. What did you think?
It is. So I had just watched James Acaster's for...
What is happening?
If you listen to the podcast, you'll understand that. That's a recurring segment.
Okay. Tell me more about this podcast.
Yes. Well, so I had just watched James Acaster's 4-part comedy special on Netflix called Repertoire, and I just loved it. So I thought to myself, this guy would be a good podcaster. Well, looking for a podcast, lo and behold, he has several, but this one is the one about food. So he and Ed Gamble, they're both comedians. They're the hosts. And they interview celebrity guests about what their dream menu at their dream restaurant would be. Ooh. So it's definitely about the joy of eating more than the joy of cooking. But it's great because you get to hear all these people share stories about their favorite foods, their favorite restaurants. It's just really enjoyable. I've loved what I've listened to so far. My favorite episodes that I've listened to have been with Emily V. Gordon, Aparna Nancherla, Reggie Watts, and Jean Grey. But there's a huge backlog with tons more other people that I'm very interested in, so I'm excited to listen to more of this.
And what I just exclaimed is so basically they have to choose their like their like entree, well in British, starter, main and dessert dream menu, and like your drink, and like but the first bit is always, would you have poppadoms or bread to start with, and they always interrupt that with that question rather than wait for it to start as a segment. So yeah.
Just like a waiter.
Just like a waiter would do. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm so glad you've listened to that, Meg. I'm glad. You should tell me when you listen to them in the future, because I'm sure I think I've pretty much listened to all of them. So yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
How about you, Amanda? What have you been consuming in your...
Amanda already went.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There's a part of me that I'm like, LJ is kind of pregnancy brain.
I totally am. I'm really sorry. I'm all over the place. Right. For me, I've basically mainly been watching British Bake Off, which we've kind of covered. I don't think I've branched out more than that. But I'm totally up for suggestions like you, Justine. I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut, food media wise. I'm pretty up for that. All right. Well, that's great. before we finish the show, as always, we have some shout outs. We've been having a lot of interaction with lots of people on various social media platforms. So sharing the foods that we're cooking for fall, that was a question we asked people to tell us about. Mary told us that she was cooking chili, which has totally inspired me to put that on my meal planning for the next couple of weeks. Mary also told us that her favourite acid was citrus, especially lemons. And, you know, that made me think that you best believe if life is giving Mary lemons, she is going to be making some contest-winning lemonade. Am I right, Meg?
Yes.
Diana also told us her favourite acid, which is vinegar. And Mrs. Casper is also a vinegar fan. So, Amanda, you've got pals that love vinegar too.
Justice for vinegar.
Cooking Gives Me Life followed Meg in cooking miso eggs, but instead of miso eggs, they've made miso salmon. So they got on that miso train with you. And then on National Noodle Day, Dan on Facebook struggled to choose one favourite noodle. He actually opted for ramen, zarusoba, or pasta puttanesca. So he couldn't decide, I guess, whether he was in Japan or Italy, but it all sounds delightful to me.
That sounds like Dan.
Nessie told us that she was also loving Stump Solar, which we spoke about last episode. And Nirawit actually gave Solar's first Food 52 column recipe a go, which was the chicken and rice, which they shared some photos. It looked really delicious. I think I'm going to have to try that out.
Yeah,
as
bravo
well
on that one.
And we also had some lovely people tell us how much they enjoy listening to our podcast. So thank you to Heidi from Vibrant Visionaries and also Sea Salt and Oysters. And thank you also to the Adam and Andy podcast for chatting with us a lot on socials the past couple of weeks. And of course, anyone that we've missed, thank you. We get a lot of interaction every episode. We love hearing what you have to say. And we can't possibly shout out everybody or we're here all day, but we see you, we appreciate you, we love you. And this week we would have loved to share a review, but am I right? We don't have one. Still,
We don't have.
So if you do have a spare 5 minutes and you fancy showing us even more love in exchange for our virtual blown kisses, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and we would be forever grateful and also read it out on the show. So thank you for joining us this episode. Next time on the podcast, we'll be discussing how we felt about everything salt, fat, acid, heat as a whole in our season wrap-up. Please write in and tell us what you thought, and we will read out some of your opinions as well. Thank you. Goodbye. That's enough.
Thanks for listening to Pod Appétit Gourmet Takes.
We'd love to hear from you, so find us on Twitter and Instagram at pod_appétit.
And on Facebook at Pod Appétit Podcast.
You can also email us at podappetitpodcast@gmail.com and find all of our episodes on our website, podappetitpodcast.com.
From our bedroom studio to your ears comes a show that is bound to have you laughing, either with or at the hosts, relating to the stories, and even learning a little along the way. Join Bhavni and Taranji every Thursday on Drive With Us podcast as they strive to make your commute more enjoyable by sharing the disasters of theirs.
I was driving I wasn't. Welcome to Maryland.
The way you said it.
Welcome. You'll see more, just wait.
Be a part of the show by submitting your stories to be featured on the Commuter Update and let listeners around the world know how crazy, entertaining, and weird commuting can be.
There is a flock of full-grown turkeys, and every time a car tried to go by them, they would just lunge at the hood of the car.
I have the nerve to say in my hysteria, oh no, I need to see the body.
We need a body.
I said that to a LAPD officer.
Go to www.drivewithuspodcast.com to share your stories, listen to episodes, and get access to extra content.